The autumn air carried a crisp bite as Imani Richardson walked briskly through downtown Westbrook. At 38, she exuded confidence with each step, her tailored navy pantsuit and sensible heels reflecting her decade-long career as one of the city's most respected public defenders. Today was especially significant. After months of preparation, she was heading to the courthouse to represent a young man wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. The weight of the case files in her leather briefcase reminded her of what was at stake. Jamal Davis, only 19, faced potential years behind bars for a robbery he couldn't have committed. The evidence was circumstantial at best, built more on prejudice than fact. But Imani had uncovered contradictory police testimony, and today was her chance to present it. Checking her watch, she quickened her pace. Judge Harmon was notoriously punctual, and she wanted time to review her notes before the hearing. As she approached the intersection, the pedestrian signal indicated she had 20 seconds to cross. Imani stepped onto the crosswalk confidently, mentally rehearsing her opening statement. The police cruiser appeared seemingly out of nowhere, turning sharply and nearly clipping her. Imani jumped back, her heart racing as the vehicle screeched to a halt inches from her legs. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing a red-faced officer with close-cropped blonde hair and cold, blue eyes. "Watch where you're going," he barked, despite Imani clearly having the right of way. "I had the walk signal, officer," Imani replied calmly, gesturing toward the pedestrian light. Years of courtroom experience had taught her to maintain composure. In confrontational situations, the officer's gaze narrowed as he took in her appearance, her dark skin, her professional attire, the briefcase in her hand. Something in his expression shifted, hardened. "ID," he demanded, opening his car door and stepping out onto the street. "Excuse me?" Imani asked, genuinely confused by the escalation. "I'm simply crossing the street on my way to work." "I said identification. Now." The officer, his nameplate read Officer Reynolds, moved closer, his hand resting meaningfully on his belt. Imani felt a familiar knot form in her stomach, the same one she felt whenever her professional demeanor wasn't enough to shield her from prejudice. Around them, morning commuters slowed, some stopping entirely to watch the scene unfold. A few raised phones recording, "Officer Reynolds, I've done nothing wrong. I'm late for court, and so you're resisting a lawful order?" Reynolds cut her off, his voice rising. "Turn around and place your hands against the wall." "This is absurd," Imani stated firmly, though she could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. "You have no probable cause to detain me." Reynolds' face twisted with anger. In one swift motion, he grabbed Imani's arm, spinning her around with enough force that her briefcase fell to the ground, spilling papers across the damp sidewalk. The force of his grip sent a shock of pain through her shoulder. "Stop resisting," he shouted, though Imani had offered no physical resistance. "I am not resisting," she replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You are assaulting me without cause, Officer Reynolds. There are witnesses." Indeed, the crowd had grown. Multiple phones were raised, recording the incident. A young woman stepped forward, concern etched across her face. "She wasn't doing anything wrong," the woman called out. "She had the right of way." Reynolds ignored her, roughly pushing Imani against the building wall. "ID, now, or you're going to jail." With careful, deliberate movements, Imani reached into her jacket pocket and produced her wallet. "My bar card is in there as well, officer. Reynolds, I'm an attorney on my way to court." Something flickered across Reynolds's face, uncertainty perhaps, but it quickly hardened back into determination. He snatched the wallet and flipped it open. His eyes widened slightly at the bar. Association card, but he continued to the driver's license. "Imani Richardson," he read aloud, his tone suggesting the name meant nothing to him. Yes, Imani confirmed, and I'm due in Judge Harmon's courtroom in 20 minutes. My client's freedom depends on my presence. Reynolds snorted. Your kind always has excuses. The naked prejudice in his words sent a ripple through the gathered crowd. Someone called out, "That's racist." Another voice added, "We're recording everything." Imani met Reynolds' gaze directly. My kind? You mean attorneys? Or are you referring to something else, officer? A flush crept up Reynolds' neck. Don't get smart with me. You were jaywalking, disrupting traffic. The light was green, and I had the walk signal. Imani interrupted, her voice projecting clearly. A skill honed through years of courtroom advocacy. Every witness here saw it. Every recording will show it. What they'll also show is an officer using excessive force against a citizen who committed no infraction. Reynolds's radio crackled to life. A dispatcher's voice requested a status update. Reynolds hesitated, then keyed his mic, just handling a jaywalking violation downtown, situation under control. Imani seized the moment. Officer Reynolds, I understand you're doing your job, but I need you to understand something too. She spoke with measured precision, the same tone she used when addressing jurors. I am Imani Richardson, Senior Public Defender for Westbrook County. I'm due in court to defend a young man whose entire future hangs in the balance today. She gestured toward her scattered papers. Those documents contain evidence that will likely exonerate him. Evidence related to police testimony that contradicts itself. Evidence of a system that sometimes sees color before it sees truth. Reynolds' expression flickered between anger and uncertainty. The growing crowd, the recording phones, the revelation of her identity. It was clearly not how he had expected this encounter to unfold. If you arrest me now, Imani continued, you'll need to explain to Judge Harmon why his scheduled hearing can't proceed. You'll need to explain to your superiors why you detained a court officer without cause, and you'll likely feature prominently in a civil rights lawsuit that will draw significant media attention. She paused, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Or you can help me gather my papers and we can both continue with our day. The tension in the air was palpable as Reynolds processed his options. Around them, the crowd waited, witness to a pivotal moment where power dynamics hung in delicate balance. Reynolds' jaw tightened as he weighed his options. The growing crowd and their recording phones created an audience he hadn't anticipated. With visible reluctance, he released Imani's arm and took a step back. Fine, get your papers and move. Along, he muttered, tossing her wallet back with barely concealed contempt. Imani knelt to gather her scattered documents, maintaining her professional composure despite the trembling in her hands. A few bystanders stepped forward to help, including the young woman who had spoken up earlier. Thank you, Imani said quietly to her helpers. To Reynolds, she added, Officer, I'd like your badge number. Reynolds' face darkened. You got my name. That's enough. Your badge number is public information, Officer Reynolds. I'm entitled to request it. Imani stood now, briefcase reorganized, her eyes level with his. After a tense moment, Reynolds recited his badge number in a clipped tone. Imani committed it to memory, along with every detail of the encounter. This would not be the end of the matter, but she had more pressing concerns awaiting her at the courthouse. Thank you for your cooperation, she said formally. I need to be on my way now. As she turned to leave, Reynolds called after her, his voice carrying a warning. Be more careful crossing streets, Ms. Richardson. Imani didn't respond, keeping her pace steady as she continued toward the courthouse. Behind her she could hear the crowd dispersing, some people murmuring about what they'd witnessed. Her shoulder ached where Reynolds had grabbed her, and she knew it would bruise. Physical evidence of an encounter that had left invisible marks as well. The marble halls of the Westbrook County Courthouse typically brought Imani a sense of purpose. Today, they felt cold and unwelcoming as she rushed toward courtroom 3B. The encounter with Officer Reynolds had cost her precious preparation time, and her pulse still raced from the adrenaline. "Ms. Richardson!" A young man in a well-worn suit hurried toward her. Marcus Jenkins, her paralegal, looked worried. "We were getting concerned. Judge Harmon is ready to start." "I'm here now," Imani said, smoothing her jacket and wincing slightly at the pain in her shoulder. "Has the prosecution brought any last-minute surprises?" Marcus fell into step beside her. "No changes to their witness list. But there's something, else the chief of police is in the gallery." Imani raised an eyebrow. Chief Diana Wallace rarely attended routine hearings. Her presence suggested this case had attracted more attention than anticipated. "Interesting," Imani murmured as they approached the courtroom doors. "Let's give them a show worth watching, then." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low conversation. Imani spotted her client, Jamal Davis, sitting tensely at the defense table. His mother occupied the front row of the gallery, worry etched across her face. Across the aisle, Assistant District Attorney Hoffman arranged his notes with smug confidence. And there in the back row sat Chief Wallace, her silver-streaked hair and ramrod-straight posture unmistakable. Their eyes met briefly as Imani walked down the center aisle. The chief gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. As Imani reached Jamal, she squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "Ready?" "Yes, ma'am," he whispered, though fear shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for being here." "All rise! The Honorable Judge Richard Harmon presiding," called the bailiff. Judge Harmon entered, his robes billowing slightly as he took his seat at the bench. Known for his no-nonsense approach and even-handed justice, he commanded instant respect. "Be seated," he instructed. "People versus Jamal Davis, case number 24, CR 7382. Are both parties ready to proceed?" "The state is ready, Your Honor," Hoffman stated. "Defense is ready," Imani affirmed, ignoring the lingering discomfort in her shoulder. Judge Harmon nodded. "Mr. Hoffman, call your first witness." The state calls Officer Peter Wilson. A uniformed officer entered and was sworn in. As he settled into the witness stand, Imani studied him carefully. Officer Wilson had been the first responder to the robbery scene and had apprehended Jamal 2 blocks away from the convenience store that had been robbed. Hoffman led Wilson through his testimony with practiced ease. The officer described responding to the 911 call, obtaining a description of the suspect, male, black, wearing a dark hoodie, approximately 5'10", and spotting Jamal running nearby. "And when you apprehended the defendant, what did you find?" Hoffman asked. "The defendant had $87 in cash in his pocket," Wilson stated. "The amount reported stolen was just over $80. "And was the defendant wearing clothing matching the description given by the store clerk?" "Yes, sir. Black hoodie, dark jeans." Hoffman nodded with satisfaction. "Nothing further, Your Honor." Judge Harmon turned to Imani. "Cross-examination, Ms. Richardson?" Imani approached the witness stand, her legal pad in hand. Despite the morning's disturbance, her mind was now razor-focused. "Officer Wilson, you testified that you received a description of a black male in a dark hoodie, correct?" "That's correct." "And approximately how many young black men in dark hoodies do you estimate were in that area of Westbrook on that evening?" Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't say exactly. More than one, would you agree?" "Probably, yes." "You also testified that my client was running when you spotted him. Did you inquire as to why he was running?" Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. "He was running from the scene of a crime." "Was he running toward or away from the convenience store that was robbed?" A pause. "Away." "And how far from the store did you apprehend him?" "About 2 blocks." Imani nodded, then placed a document on the evidence display. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit A, a map of the area in question." The map showed the convenience store, nearby streets, and a highlighted location 2 blocks away. Officer Wilson, is this where you apprehended Mr. Davis? Yes, that looks right. And could you please show the court where Mr. Davis lives? Wilson hesitated, then pointed to a location on the map. Let the record show that Officer Wilson has identified the defendant's residence, which is 3 blocks beyond the location where he was apprehended. So Mr. Davis was actually running toward his home, not simply away from the store, correct? Wilson frowned. He was still coming from the direction of the robbery. Along with anyone else traveling east in that part of town, Imani countered. Now, regarding the $87 found in my client's possession, did you find any evidence linking that specific currency to the convenience store? No marked bills, if that's what you're asking. Did you find the black handgun that the store clerk described? Wilson shifted again. No weapon was recovered. So, to summarize, you apprehended a young black man in common clothing who happened to be running toward his home with a typical amount of cash in his pocket and no weapon. Is that correct? The description matched, Wilson insisted, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. The description that matched thousands of young men in our city. Imani paused, letting that sink in. Officer Wilson, what time did you arrive at the robbery scene? Approximately 8:42 p.m. Imani placed another document on the display. Defense. Exhibit B, my client's time card from his part-time job at Westbrook Community Center, showing he clocked out at 8:37 p.m. that evening. The center is located here. She indicated a spot on the map, nearly a mile from the convenience store. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Harmon tapped his gavel once. Officer Wilson, would you agree it's physically impossible for Mr. Davis to have robbed a store at 8:40 p.m. if he was clocked in at work until 8:37 p.m., a mile away? Wilson's face flushed. The time card could be falsified. The time card is electronically logged and verified by his supervisor, who is present in court today and prepared to testify. Imani let that information settle. One more question, officer. Wilson, in your initial police report, you stated the suspect was described as approximately 5'10". Is that correct? Yes. And how tall is my client? Wilson glanced at Jamal. I'd say about 6 feet. Mr. Davis is 6'3", Officer Wilson. A significant difference from the description you were given. Wouldn't you agree? Before Wilson could answer, Imani continued, Your Honor, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against Jamal Davis. The evidence clearly shows he could not have committed this robbery, and his detention appears to have been based on racial profiling rather than legitimate probable cause. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harmon considered Imani's motion. Ada Hoffman stood quickly. Your Honor, the state objects. One time card doesn't negate the other evidence. What other evidence, Mr. Hoffman? Judge Harmon interrupted. From what I've heard, you have a vague description that doesn't match the defendant's height, no weapon, no marked bills, and an alibi supported by employment records. He turned to Officer Wilson. Officer, did you or any other officers review security footage from the convenience store? Wilson hesitated. The camera was malfunctioning that night, Your Honor. Convenient, Judge Harmon remarked dryly. Ms. Richardson, your motion for dismissal is granted. Mr. Davis, you are free to go. Relief washed over Jamal's face as he turned to embrace his mother, who had burst into tears. Imani gathered her documents, satisfied with the outcome, but disturbed by the underlying pattern it represented. Another young black man nearly swept into the criminal justice system based on flimsy evidence and racial assumptions. As the courtroom began to clear, Chief Wallace approached the defense table. Ms. Richardson, might I have a word with you privately? Imani nodded, curious. Of course, Chief. They moved to a quiet corner of the Chief Wallace's expression was serious, her posture rigid. "That was impressive work," the chief began, "but I suspect you know I'm not here just to compliment your legal skills." Imani raised an eyebrow. "The incident this morning? News travels fast, several. Videos have already been forwarded to my office." Chief Wallace's voice remained professional, but her eyes reflected concern. "I'd like to hear your version of events." Imani gave a concise account of her encounter with Officer Reynolds. As she spoke, she noticed the chief's expression growing, increasingly troubled. "Are you injured?" Wallace asked when Imani mentioned being grabbed. In response, Imani carefully removed her jacket, revealing a darkening bruise on her upper arm. The chief's lips thinned to a tight line. "This isn't the first complaint about Reynolds," Wallace admitted, "but it's the first with such clear evidence. I'd like you to file a formal statement." "I intend to," Imani assured her, "not just for myself. If he's treating a professional woman this way in broad daylight with witnesses, imagine how he behaves in situations with less scrutiny." Chief Wallace nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. Reynolds has been on my radar. His record shows escalating aggression, particularly with minorities. I've been building a case for disciplinary action, but department politics," she trailed off. "The thin blue line," Imani finished for her. "Something like that." Wallace sighed. His father was deputy chief before retiring last year. "There's resistance to holding Reynolds accountable. So you need irrefutable evidence," Imani concluded. "Exactly. And now we have it." The chief's expression hardened with determination. "This incident, combined with previous complaints, gives me what I need. I want you to know I take this seriously, Ms. Richardson. Very seriously." "I believe you do," Imani said, studying the older woman's face. Chief Wallace had risen through the ranks during an era when both her gender and her principles had made her path difficult. Her reputation for integrity was well known. "There's something else," Wallace added. "The Police Oversight Committee is meeting next week. I'd like you to testify about your experience." Imani considered this. The committee had been established last year after community pressure, but many viewed it as toothless, a political gesture rather than a mechanism for real accountability. "Will it make a difference?" she asked frankly. "With your testimony?" "Yes." Wallace's voice lowered. "Look, I've been pushing for systematic changes in how we train officers, especially around implicit bias. Reynolds isn't just one bad apple. He's a symptom of deeper problems. Your testimony could help advance reforms I've been advocating for months." Imani nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there." "Thank you." The chief handed Imani her card. "My direct line is on the back. Call me if you need anything or have any concerns about retaliation." As Chief Wallace departed, Imani rejoined Marcus and the Davis family. Jamal's mother embraced her tearfully. "You saved my boy," Mrs. Davis whispered. "God bless you for what you do." Imani returned the embrace, careful of her bruised shoulder. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Davis. The system doesn't always work as it should, but today it did." After finalizing details with the family, Imani and Marcus walked together toward the courthouse exit. "What was that about with the chief?" Marcus asked curiously. Imani briefly explained the morning's confrontation with Officer Reynolds. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. He had no idea who he was messing with. "That's just it, Marcus. He shouldn't have messed with anyone that way, regardless of who they are." Imani's voice was passionate but controlled. "Every citizen deserves equal treatment under the law. The fact that I'm a public defender shouldn't matter, but it did. And that's part of the problem." They pushed through the heavy courthouse doors into the afternoon sunlight. Imani winced as the movement jarred her shoulder. "You should get that checked out," Marcus suggested, noticing her discomfort. "And maybe take the rest of the day off?" Imani shook her head. "I have 3 client meetings this afternoon, but I'll make time to file that complaint first." Always. Fighting, Marcus observed with admiration. Always, Imani agreed. 1 week later, Imani stood before the police oversight committee in the city council chambers. Her bruise had faded to a yellowish smudge, but the memory remained vivid. As she recounted her experience with Officer Reynolds, she noticed him. Seated in the back row, his expression a mixture of defiance and discomfort. Chief Wallace sat nearby, her attention unwavering. This incident reflects a disturbing pattern, Imani concluded. Officer Reynolds didn't just violate department policy. He violated the constitutional rights of a citizen. The fact that I had the knowledge and resources to stand up for myself is irrelevant. Many in our community do not have such advantages, and they suffer similar treatment in silence. The committee members listened intently. When Imani finished, the chairperson turned to Chief Wallace. "Chief, what actions have been taken regarding this incident?" Wallace stood. "Officer Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Based on Ms. Richardson's complaint and corroborating video evidence, along with previous incidents in his file, I've recommended termination and possible criminal charges for assault." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Reynolds' face had drained of color. "Furthermore," Wallace continued, "this incident has prompted a department-wide review of our training protocols regarding civilian encounters and use of force. We're implementing mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, effective immediately." The committee chairperson nodded approvingly. "These are positive steps, Chief. We'll expect regular updates on the implementation and effectiveness of these measures." As the meeting adjourned, Imani gathered her belongings. She noticed Officer Reynolds being approached by internal affairs officers. The reality of his situation seemed to be sinking in as they spoke to him in hushed tones. Outside the chambers, Chief Wallace caught up with Imani. "Thank you for your testimony. It made a difference." "I hope so," Imani replied. "Meaningful change requires more than one officer being disciplined. It needs systemic reform." "Agreed." Wallace offered her hand. "This is just the beginning. I'm establishing a community advisory board and would value your participation." Imani accepted the handshake. "I'll consider it. My priority remains my clients, people like Jamal Davis, who need advocates when the system fails them." "That's why your voice is essential," Wallace insisted. "You see the consequences of these failures every day." As they parted ways, Imani reflected on the unexpected chain of events. One morning, confrontation had catalyzed changes that might benefit countless citizens. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a step toward accountability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "News just broke about Reynolds. You did it." Imani smiled slightly as she typed her response. "We did it, and we're just getting started." She pocketed her phone and walked toward her office, where case files for tomorrow's clients awaited. The fight continued. One case, one day, one small victory at a time. In the distance, she could see the intersection where Officer Reynolds had stopped her. Pedestrians crossed freely now, the walk signal glowing white against the traffic lights. Imani stepped forward with purpose, the weight of her briefcase a reminder of the work still to be done, but also of the power she carried, not just for herself, but for all those who couldn't yet speak for themselves. The autumn breeze had softened, carrying the promise of change. Imani breathed it in deeply and continued on her way.